Thank you for joining us live on our Golden Edge Facebook page. Cassie Soto here after the Golden Knights front office have announced that head coach Gerard Gallant and assistant coach Mike Kelly have been fired and will be replaced by none other than ex-San Jose Sharks head coach Peter DeBoer. Guys, thank you for joining me today. Here to help me unpack all of this Golden Knights news are none other than our Golden Knights writers for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Adam Hill and Ben Gotz. Guys, let's get right into this. Did anybody see this coming and developing the way that it has?
Well, it's the NHL, so you can never be too surprised when things like this happen. The record for coach firings in a season is 11. We're already up to 7 in the NHL this season after Gerard Gallant got fired. So you can never be too shocked, but still, this is a guy that was kind of universally respected and beloved, at least in the locker room of the Golden Knights. This is a guy who obviously did outstanding work leading this team to the Stanley Cup final. Its inaugural season, he won the Jack Adams Award for best coach. So certainly, you have to be at least a little surprised that Gerard Gallant is currently out of a job. I would expect he will not be out of a job for very long, whether that's this offseason, a year down the road. I think he will get another opportunity to coach at some point, but it's certainly surprising that the Knights decided that he was not the right coach for this team at this moment right now.
Right. It was particularly surprising. I think the fact that he got fired it came from out of nowhere a little bit. They have been struggling. They've been underperforming. Last year there were some whispers, some rumblings that something might be going on. There was always a lot of chatter about some disconnect between Gallant and the front office. And I think it was one of those cases of, hey, this is just the time. It's 4-game losing streak. They're on the road. They've got all these tough games ahead of them. Maybe this is just the time. But I think the bigger surprise is that it's Pete DeBoer that comes in. Not because of, the animosity between the fans is one thing. Like, they'll get over it if he wins. They'll be fine with him. But it's just that it came together so quickly. A lot of times you see an interim coach or somebody promoted. This time it's like, hey, this guy's available. He's in. He's the coach. Come join us on the road trip. Like all of that makes it very surprising.
Right. And do we think, was this purely performance-based? We mentioned a little bit of a rut this season. Do we feel like as time goes on, maybe we'll find out that there was some issues between coaching and the front office?
Well, ultimately, I do think it's about results. This is a results-based business, and the Knights ultimately weren't really getting it done this year. They have lost more games than they've won this season. They have 24 wins in 49 games. And frankly, that's just not good enough for a team that was expected to be at the top of the Pacific Division entering this year to contend for a Stanley Cup again. Now, there's a lot of underlying numbers that would tell you that they were probably going to figure out under Gerard Gallant. They are the top of the league in the advanced metric expected goals. They're top of the league in shot attempts percentage, scoring chance percentage. There's a lot of metrics that would tell you the Golden Knights are underachieving partially because they've just been unlucky.
Yeah.
Now, there's parts of their performance that can also not be excused. Their performances against the Los Angeles Kings and Columbus Blue Jackets to close out their recent 7-game homestand were just frankly unacceptable for a team that's billing itself, at least entering the year, as a Stanley Cup contender. So I just ultimately think that the Knights didn't think that they were seeing what they needed to see from this team under Gerard Gallant. And they're thinking that maybe a new voice, and certainly a respected voice in Peter DeBoer, is going to be the guy that's going to get more out of this squad.
And I think performance-based is a weird term.
Okay.
Because, performance-based, you could say, hey, they made the playoffs 2 years as an expansion team. They made one run to the Stanley Cup final, and now they're just a couple of points out of first place in the division. So a lot of teams would just kill for that. But for Gallant, I think one of the things he set up these expectations because he took this group that was supposed to finish last, took them to a Stanley Cup final run, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's what they are now. They're this unbelievable juggernaut, and if you're not living up to that, he's going to pay the consequence. But I think it's performance-based with an asterisk of expectation, and also, like we mentioned, the issues with the front office. I think there was always kind of that thought of, when can we make this move? It wasn't if it's going to happen. It's
okay.
When. And right now they're like, okay, this is the time. We're underperforming. We're out of a playoff spot now. As of last night, they've fallen out of a playoff spot officially. Yep. This is the time to do it, and I think that they took advantage of that.
Well, McCrimmon said he didn't want to do the ands ifs kind of scenario there. Would this have still happened had they have not? They have won?
If they won last
night, right?
I don't think so.
Well, I think the bigger question is, would this have happened if Pete DeBoer wasn't available? Okay, McCrimmon got asked that, and he kind of deferred, hemmed and hawed, didn't really answer the question. But, I mean, that's, I think, the key question here is that you have Gerard Gallant, a Jack Adams Award winner who's taken a team to a Stanley Cup final. I assume that in the Knights front office, just promoting someone under Gallant from the assistant level wasn't going to be good enough to turn this team around. Yeah. But when all of a sudden on December 11th, the Sharks decide that Peter DeBoer's tenure with them has come to a close, and all of a sudden you have a guy who's taken 2 different franchises to the Stanley Cup final, kind of just available and on his couch. That's just a much more real option, I think, for the Knights front office to have been maybe discussing behind the scenes. So I think that's the kind of the big domino that fell here, is that a guy with as much experience as Pete DeBoer all of a sudden became available, and so the Knights could all of a sudden look at door number 2 and see the potential for an upgrade.
Right, all right. Well, players obviously hear in this news that their coach since the beginning has been let go. Some players already responding. Let's take a listen to what they had to say.
I think we need to hear the message loud and clear and turn things around and be better.
You know, we have to be better, and you know, we're the reason why this change happened.
Everyone loved him and loved playing for him, and we just, I guess, came up short for him, and you know, it cost him his job.
All right, guys. Well, the players kind of taking responsibility there. Obviously, they're the ones doing the work on the ice, but feeling like they let down their head coach. Does that kind of, I guess, amplify the issue that maybe Gallant was too close with his players, and maybe that affected some stuff on the ice?
I'm sure you could, draw that conclusion. Gerard Gallant, we all know, is a player's coach.
Right.
Players love playing for him. He's a guy who tries to give his players as much rest as possible. He's a guy who doesn't change his lineup up that much unless he really feels it's necessary. He's not a guy who likes to make change for change's sake. He gives his players a lot of rope, and I think you could certainly make the argument that in this case his players kind of hung him with it. Mm-hmm. Like I said, they came out really poor against the Los Angeles Kings and the Columbus Blue Jackets recently, and I mean, he said recently that he didn't think all the Knights' poor starts, because they've had several poor starts recently, were necessarily because he wasn't waving pom-poms in the locker room. He's like, these guys are professional athletes. They're supposed to get up. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. But at the same time, maybe the Knights front office felt like we need a heavier hand in that locker room to get more out of these guys, to whip some of these players in shape that are underperforming. So, I mean, I think you could definitely make that argument. If Gerard Gallant was a player's coach, and maybe because his players got comfortable under him, the Knights front office decided a change was necessary.
Yeah. All right, well, since we're throwing around sound bites here, we do have the sound bite that I think fans can vividly remember. Their former head coach now calling their new head coach a clown in the playoffs last year, and we have that sound bite.
So according to Pete DeBoer, you are the master chirper of the Vegas bench, going after poor Logan Couture here.
Yeah.
You want to clear your good name as far as being the guy chirping the Sharks?
I really don't want to talk about that, but I think I'm going to have to a little bit, because, for that clown to say that in the paper yesterday, it's not right. There might have been 2 incidents that happened, and I'll tell you both of the incidents. Logan Couture, I thought it was an embellishment, so I'm yelling at the referee. I'm not yelling at Logan Couture. The other one, game 2, Evander Kane's yelling at Ryan Reed between the bench. And Evander yells at me, he said, "Hey, coach, when are you going to send your big guy out in the ice and play him more than 4 minutes?" And I said, he's played 10 minutes every game, and he's going to play a lot more. So them are the 2 times. If I'm going to be a chirper and a loudmouth, I think people know me as a coach and respect me as a coach. And if he's going to yap about that, that's a little unclassy for me.
All right, a clown, unclassy, throwing everything around. The fact that he does read the newspaper, we appreciate
Yes.
here at the Review Journal.
Gerard Gallant, supporter of local journalism.
Yes. All right, guys. Well, for fans to hear that, I think the question they're asking themselves is really, like, Peter DeBoer of all people, what can we tell them?
Well, he's had a lot of success in the league,
Yeah.
taking 2 different teams on long runs in the playoffs for sure. And I know people know him from this kind of back and forth and the fact that the Knights and the Sharks have been heated rivals. He's a good coach, and he's a very different kind of coach than Gerard Gallant. And I think that is the main point of what the team is doing. Ben talked about it. Gerard Gallant, a player's coach, a guy who took these, the outcasts, the golden misfits as they were called, and just kind of gave them the confidence and let them go on this long run. And then last year, another playoff run where they could have been a favorite if not for Game 7 happening the way that it happened, and everything with the clown back and forth with Gallant there. So, this is a different kind of a guy who I think how fans feel about him is going to be determined by how they perform. If they step up, make a big run, and they make a run in the playoffs, all of a sudden he's the most loved guy in Vegas. And if they fall apart, he's hated still.
Yeah, I mean, Peter DeBoer obviously has had success at multiple stops before coming to Las Vegas. He's set up well, I think we can say, too. I mentioned before that the Knights have been a little bit unlucky in terms of some advanced metrics showing how they're doing 5-on-5. Well, all of a sudden, if you're Peter DeBoer, you're walking into a scenario where maybe you're due some puck luck, so I'm sure he's happy about that. Kelly McCrimmon mentioned that Peter DeBoer's teams are usually good on special teams. That's an area, too, where the Knights have been lacking a little bit recently. Their penalty kill, especially since the new year, has been really underperforming, so that's something he could potentially turn around. And, yeah, we mentioned Peter DeBoer's a good coach. He didn't necessarily get fired in San Jose earlier this year because he forgot how to coach. He got fired because his goalies couldn't stop the puck necessarily, and his roster was kind of hamstrung by salary cap stuff.
Yeah.
We saw the Sharks lose their captain, Joe Pavelski, to the Dallas Stars this offseason. The Sharks kind of tried to backfill with some younger guys from their minor leagues. It didn't really work. So they underachieved. DeBoer got fired, and they haven't really bounced back since his firing. We've seen some teams, all across the league over multiple years, kind of bounce back when a coach gets fired. The Sharks haven't, which I think tells you the kind of state of their roster that DeBoer was left to coach this year.
All right, well, it's not like the guys get any time to really acclimate to their new head coach back on the ice tomorrow night, just a day after all of this news. How quickly can a relationship build? And we mentioned the drama between these two franchises, his ex-franchise. How is that going to play out, really?
I guess we'll see. We'll see it all play out in beautiful Ottawa in January tomorrow. It's a business, so I think you just kind of figure it out. Like I said, we've seen this happen just in this league this year where John Hines gets fired by the New Jersey Devils, and then he gets a call from the Nashville Predators like, hey, come be our coach, and he's at the rink the next day.
Yeah.
This happens in the league. A lot of guys are used to it. They know that ultimately this is a business. We all love hockey. Hockey is a really fun game to play, but when you get to the NHL level, it's a business. And so I think you put aside old feelings, then you just kind of have to get to work because there's a game to play. There's 2 points on the line. It's 2 key points for the Knights, who, as we mentioned, are currently out of the playoff spot. They're only 3 points out of first place. So every game from this point to the end of the season becomes really important. Oh, and by the way, Mark Stone, big game for him tomorrow. He's playing his former team in Ottawa for the first time since being traded to the Golden Knights, which has been kind of swept aside in this
Changes
news.
storylines real quick.
So it's a big game for the Knights tomorrow.
And I think one of the things, I don't know that he's going to make some big splash like these first couple of games. He's got 3 games on the road, and then the All-Star game, and then a bye week. So they've got a bunch of time after this little next 3 games to try to figure some things out. And I think that's when you'll see him really start to put his print on the team.
And is it weird or not weird, but I guess the timing of it to come, they're not back on home ice until February 8th.
Yeah, I think
I
that was part
believe
of it.
they don't want us bombarding the locker rooms, I think is what we're doing here,
It's
right?
kind of a habit of this organization. It has been over the last couple of years to make announcements like right after the media leaves the building. Late night announcements of things like they don't.
7 a.m.
They don't like to talk about things necessarily. So I think that I honestly think, in all seriousness, it might have been part of it. Of hey, we're not going to be home for a while. Let's just do this now and get it out of the way and let it simmer down a little bit before everybody's back home.
And it gives them time to potentially bond. You talk about they're not going to be at home. They're not going to be seeing their wives, girlfriends, children. So, if Peter DeBoer wants to try to bond with this team or the assistant coaches that all of a sudden he's the boss of, he's got time to go out to dinner on the road and all that stuff like that. So, they'll have time to bond, and they're going to have to do so quickly here.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. I'm sure you'll be working on this all day, so we'll let you get back
Easy
to
day.
it.
Slow
Easy
day,
day,
Cassie.
slow
No
day.
problem.
News day.
Follow this guy for UFC coverage, too. I think Conor McGregor, that
guy.
small name.
That guy's back
is
tonight.
happening also. No big deal. Just a few things happening here in Vegas. Everything you need to know. Be sure to follow these guys, Ben S. Gotz and Adam Hill, LVRJ, on Twitter, guys. Thanks again. Well, like I said, the Golden Knights will be back on the ice on Thursday under new head coach Peter DeBoer. We will be bringing you all that here and all the reactions here in town. I'm sure there'll just be a few. Follow along at reviewjournal.com and right here on our Golden Edge Facebook page. For Ben Gotz, Adam Hill, I'm Cassie Soto. Thanks for joining us.